In the extended family environment, because you're all located in one place, year after year, month after month, whatever. Our grandmothers and our grandfathers selected specific sites for themselves in doing the teachings, doing the ceremonies. So, for example, the grandmothers would set up a site in our area that was primarily for women's ceremonies or full moon ceremonies. And the same with the grandfathers. The grandfathers would do more what we would call sun ceremonies, honoring the grandfather's son. And so there would be a selected site for that. As we grow older and we start to become, quote unquote, what we call medicine people, is that we're invited to go to either or. So say like on a full moon ceremony, they would honor the men and say, okay, you need this information, and vice versa. If the grandfathers were doing a ceremony, they would invite some of the women to come in to that grandfather ceremony, so they would understand how the energies work in both realms, the feminine and the masculine. In the grandmother ceremonies, they would always create an altar. It was more of a permanent site that they would use during the full moon cycle or the new moon cycle. They would use that altar or that ceremonial ground for all different occasions according to the moon. And so the many times I went and joined in, the grandmothers would always take offerings for the moon. Some of the grandmothers would take crystals and lay them out on the permanent altar, if you will. On the permanent altar, there were things placed or embedded in the Mother Earth that was there for who knows how many hundreds and hundreds of years. That was established by the grandmothers way back when. And so in today's world, we just enhance that altar with our offerings and our crystals and our gifts. A lot of water was taken to the altars, a lot of herbs. One that stands out would be the cedar, the burning of the cedar, like the smudge. And so they would use the smudge, the smoke, to summons in the grandmother spirit. They would place crystals in specific areas around the altar. More depending on the age of the grandmothers, of who would set up the altar first. Obviously, the elder grandmothers would go in, they would sage everything down, bless everything down, bless all the participants that are coming into the ceremony, and bless their offerings, and then they would guide them to the center altar, and then they would put their placements there on the altar. Once that was done, then the grandmothers would do a prayer, summoning in all of, asking permission to call in the spirit of the grandmother moon, the divine feminine energy, calling all of the plants, all the animals, all of the feminine aspects of the plants and the animals, and especially the water, and all the other elements, the earth, the fire, the air. So they would include all that too, but there was something that was added to a full moon ceremony or a moon ceremony in general. It was a knowledge that the grandmother shared with us of the elements that work at night. And so there were a lot of night songs that were sung at the moon ceremonies. There were healing songs, moon healing songs, moon healing dances, moon healing meditations, if you will. or there would sometimes be just a silent prayer that each individual would make around the altar. More often than not, there would be a fire also placed somewhere around the ceremonial area, and that fire was mainly for purification and cleansing. As we all know, women cleanse naturally every month. And so that would be a place where the grandmothers would go over to the fire and release some of that residual, and on a spiritual realm, just release it to the fire. They also talk a lot about the moon time during the women's, ministration. And so they would give instructions of how to use that time and that energy that you're in as you're cleansing. They also said that as women are in that cycle, that they're absorbing a lot of energy around them, not only just their own, but their family's energy, the people's energy, whatever. And so sometimes it may be more difficult for some women than others. And so the grandmothers would take care of them and, clean them up and get them back on track again. So there was a lot of aspects about a full moon ceremony. It all depended upon the intention, right, of that particular moon. They also use the full moon ceremonies for anybody that had passed over, like somebody that died recently. So many times the grandmothers would honor that death, and they would do their own death ceremony for that person, especially if it was a woman, or if it was a esteemed grandmother. Then they would usually do a ceremony during the full moon or the new moon for the women that had passed over. They just on the opposite end, if a woman is pregnant, they would do a moon ceremony for that pregnancy to determine, the aspect of the child, and just kind of nurturing it. And I remember when I was young, I was still in my grandmother's room, still in my mother's room. They did a ceremony over my mom. And so they determined that I was going to be a male, right, a very strong male. And then they gave me a name appropriately for what the elders seen. And so they gave me the name Kaiba Quina'a, which broken down means the eagle who watches over the mountains. And so that was done during a moon ceremony. So again, there's a lot of aspects about how the grandmothers understood the qualities of the moon, the enhancements of the moon. And so there wasn't just one particular way that they developed the moon ceremony. It was all based on the intention of that particular time frame. Because obviously things change in the environment, we change. Monthly, daily, whatever. And so on the day of the full moon, that's when they would really initiate the ceremonies. The old grandmas, they told us the full moon or the new moon energies comes in 5-day cycles. So it's like 2 days before the full moon, 2 days after the full moon, and the day of the full moon. That's when that energy is most pronounced. And so if you do a full moon ceremony in those 5-day, in that 5-day realm, then you're good to go. Or the new moon too. You have 5 days, down on the bottom end that you can utilize. And so we take advantage of that full moon energy when we're doing water wheel ceremonies or any water ceremonies. There's another little side note here before we go on. During a full moon, the full moon has a magnetic energy that pulls all of the water towards itself, obviously in the oceans. The other thing we need to recognize is that the water inside of us, the fluid that's inside of us, our blood, our water, is also being drawn up to the full moon. That's why sometimes during a full moon cycle, things may get a little weird because a lot of water and a lot of blood are raising to our brain, and so sometimes it kind of gets confusing. That's why dogs bark. You know, dogs, the wolves, everything howl at the moon, right? That's because the water is raising up in their bodies, and so they don't understand that. And so with the animals, like the elk will howl not howl at the moon, but do whatever they do for the moon. So there's a lot of strange things that happen during a full moon energy that isn't quote unquote normal. Let me add this. If there's an eclipse during a full moon, the full moon's here, right? It's coming on the earth, coming along, and all the waters are gravitating towards the moon, right? Following me? Now, if an eclipse comes along and it comes over here, like whatever, the sun, right, comes over here, and it blocks the full moon energy, as the waters are raised before the blockage, the waters are raising, and then that sun comes over here and blocks the energy. What happens is that the waters will snap like a rubber band and go right straight back down on the earth. This has been shown in history many, many times during an eclipse where there would be major catastrophes around the planet because the water was released too fast back down onto the planet, and energies just perpetuated all the way around. So anyway, just some added information too about the full moon. Very exciting stuff. So thank you again. And for this full moon, blessings all the way around. Enjoy, find the joy, like Goldie says. Aloha.